Operation Mincemeat. After the Allied forces managed to defeat the German army in North Africa, Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, suddenly decided to give a public speech. The Allied military leadership thought, okay, the man is happy about the victory and wants to say, I won, I'm strong, and I'm unmatched. They agreed to let him speak. But the surprise came when in the middle of his speech, Churchill casually mentioned that the next attack would be on the island of Sicily, which is south of Italy. What have you done? They thought. You've just told the Germans our next move. This wasn't just any attack. If the assault on Sicily succeeded, it would open the door to an attack on Italy, leading to the downfall of Mussolini, which would then allow the liberation of France and ultimately the invasion of Germany itself. In essence, dear viewer, you can see how one careless word from Churchill almost ruined the entire war. It could have helped Hitler win the war he was beginning to lose, costing the lives of hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers, because now the German army would be waiting for them in Sicily. The Allied commanders were left wondering what to do with a plan that had already been revealed. After discussions, they decided to switch the attack from Sicily to Greece. Since the Germans would be waiting in Sicily, they'd attack Greece instead. But there was another opinion. Hitler might suspect that Churchill's slip was intentional, designed to mislead him into focusing on Sicily while the Allies actually targeted Greece. No one would genuinely make such a blunder, would they? So the question became, should they attack Sicily or Greece? They consulted Churchill. Sir, we're thinking of changing the plans and attacking Greece. Churchill's response? No way. We're attacking Sicily. Despite all objections, Churchill insisted on Sicily. So a British military leader suggested, don't we have an intelligence agency? Of course we do, they replied. Then let them solve the problem, he said. Intelligence was their go-to when things went wrong. So they went to British intelligence. Another surprise, dear viewer, was that British intelligence had a simple solution. They needed to convince Hitler that Churchill's slip was a trick, that the information about Sicily was a ruse to cover up an actual attack on Greece. But how could they do that? There were many suggestions, such as leaking the information through a spy, or even deliberately getting a spy caught, who, under interrogation, would confess that Britain intended to attack Greece, not Sicily, as Churchill had said. But this was risky, because British intelligence knew that German intelligence had the ability to extract the truth from any spy, no matter how skilled they were at lying. Then a British intelligence officer came up with an idea that is still taught in spy schools today. They would send the information through a spy whom the Germans would capture, but the spy would be dead, so he couldn't be interrogated. No one in the room spoke. They were all trying to comprehend what the officer had just said. A dead spy? How would a dead spy deliver the information to the Germans? We don't kill a spy to send the information, the officer clarified. If we find the body of a British citizen, it doesn't even have to be a soldier, dress him up in a military uniform, and throw him into the ocean at a specific location. The wind and currents should carry the body to the shores of a country under German influence, like Spain. The Germans will think he drowned while delivering the information, and they'll believe that the intel fell into their hands by accident. At this point, we need to pause for a moment. Planting a spy is no simple task. One of the basic conditions for planting a spy is that he must have a credible backstory, so that when the enemy security agencies ask questions, there's a solid identity in place, making him appear authentic and trustworthy. The same was true for the dead spy. He needed a backstory too. Who was he? What was his job? Where was he going? Every detail of his life had to be real or at least believable enough to fool German intelligence. Otherwise, the whole plan would fall apart and Hitler would realize the British were playing him. Creating a dead spy wasn't as easy as picking up a corpse and tossing it into the ocean. It was more difficult than planting a real spy because they had to invent an identity and a history for the body. Here's a small detail that shows just how complicated the plan was. British intelligence had found the body of a young British man who had recently died. They dressed him in a military officer's uniform, but now they needed an ID card for him, right? You might be thinking that making an ID card was easy for the intelligence agency, and you'd be right. But how would they get a picture of him in uniform while he was still alive? Don't suggest Photoshop. Computers didn't even exist back then. So how would they take a photo of the man alive and in uniform? The only solution was to dress the dead man in the uniform, prop him up in a chair, hold his eyes open, and quickly take the picture. But every attempt failed because the pictures clearly showed that he was dead. The solution? They had to find someone who looked like him, someone alive, and take the picture of him in uniform. Surely, in all of Britain, there would be someone who looked like the deceased man. But this would take months of searching. Imagine their luck when they discovered that American forces were stationed in Britain at the time, and one of the American officers was in a romantic relationship with a female British intelligence officer. Secretly, there was also another admirer of this British woman. And guess who that admirer was? Yes, it was the British officer who came up with the idea of the dead spy. Now, focus carefully on what's next. Among the details they worked on was to make the dead spy seem like a real British officer by giving him a girlfriend. They planned to include a photo of a real woman and a love letter in his pocket, so that when the Germans found the body, they would see the photo and letter, providing further proof that this was a real person, living a real life. The love letter would also mention the war, reinforcing the idea that he was a genuine officer. The British intelligence officer who proposed the dead spy plan was assigned to the task of finding a woman to play this role. Naturally, the first person he thought of was his colleague, the woman he loved. He asked her for a photo, and she agreed, but only if he explained what he intended to do with it. Since she worked with him in British intelligence, he told her the details of the operation and showed her a picture of the deceased man. The shock, dear viewer, was that the dead man bore a striking resemblance to the American officer she was in love with. She informed the British officer of this, and the next day they summoned the American officer. The British officers were astonished at the resemblance between the American officer and the corpse. They told him they needed to take a photo of him, claiming that they were updating the records of foreign officers stationed in Britain. The first problem was solved. They now had a picture of the dead soldier for his military ID. The second problem was the love letter itself. Every word written in the letter would reveal something about the dead spy's personality. Naturally, they could have brought in psychology experts to write it, but British intelligence rejected this idea. If psychologists wrote the letter, German psychologists would easily spot the manipulation. So once again, the British officer who came up with the dead spy idea proposed that his colleague, the one in love with the American officer, should write the love letter. She was a real person, and the American officer was also real, and they were genuinely in love. Plus, the American officer was fighting in the same war that the dead spy would have been involved in. The details would be authentic. And so the second problem was solved. The third issue was how to ensure that the paper carrying the fake information wouldn't get soaked in water and cause the ink to disappear. One officer suggested using waterproof ink, But the response was that the Germans would immediately suspect why this particular letter was written in waterproof ink. They realized that the British knew the officer would drown, and the entire operation was a trick. British intelligence then tasked scientists with inventing a new kind of ink that would dissolve in water but not completely disappear. This way, the letter would look as if it had been partially washed away before falling into German hands. With that problem solved, another one arose. They had to study the wind and ocean currents to ensure that the dead spy would wash ashore in Spain, which was under German influence. At the time, Spain was indirectly allied with Hitler, but also maintained diplomatic relationships with Britain. Spain had sent forces to help Hitler on the Eastern Front, while still hosting British diplomats. This wasn't a difficult problem to solve, as it was relatively easy to predict with wind and current patterns. So they proceeded with the plan. A British submarine set off into the ocean and released the dead spy into the water. After some time, the body washed ashore in Spain, where it was found by local fishermen. The fishermen handed the body over to Spanish authorities. The Spanish authorities, dear viewer, notified the British Foreign Office, informing them that they had found a body of a British officer. Simultaneously, they informed German forces stationed in Spain that a British officer's body had been found with a leather briefcase, cuffed to his wrist, sealed with combination locks, and protected with nitric acid. Why nitric acid, you might ask? Because when anyone tried to forcibly open the briefcase, the acid would destroy the documents inside. These kind of briefcases were well known in espionage circles at the time. When the German intelligence found out that there was a briefcase with the dead spy, they went crazy and insisted on finding out what was inside by any means necessary before the British army could take possession of the body. And that's when, my friend, the Germans took the bait, exactly as the British had planned from the beginning. You might be thinking now that nitric acid should have destroyed the information inside the briefcase, leaving the Germans empty-handed. But the answer lies in the fact that at the time, German intelligence was the strongest in the world. Opening the briefcase without damaging the contents was an easy task for them, something the British intelligence already knew. However, the British still used nitric acid to convince the Germans of the briefcase's importance, making them believe it contained highly classified and dangerous information. But don't think things went this smoothly. A new problem arose, a crucial detail that could have ruined the entire operation after all the hard work by the British. The Germans were likely to conduct an autopsy and discover that the spy hadn't drowned but died before entering the water. This would expose the deception. To prevent the Germans from performing the autopsy in Spain, British intelligence had to intervene. But how, especially when German intelligence would oversee the process? After much deliberation, they came up with two solutions. The first was to ensure that the British beach where the dead spy's body would wash ashore was far from German forces, allowing the Spanish police to be the first to handle the body. Even if the Spanish police coordinated with German intelligence, the key point was that the initial handling would be by the Germans. The second solution was that British intelligence recruited a Spanish police officer near the beach where the dead spy would arrive. This ensured that if an autopsy was conducted, it would be supervised by individuals loyal to Britain, not Germany. Thus, the autopsy results would align with what the British wanted. Then came the unexpected twist, something no one saw coming, not even you, my friend. The Germans sent a pathologist to conduct the autopsy, a top expert from the University of Madrid. But with British influence over the local police, they managed to control the situation. The Spanish police officer attending the autopsy, pretended to be sickened by the sight, acting as if he were about to vomit, raising his voice and telling the doctor that there was no need to conduct the autopsy, since it was evident that the spy had drowned. The pathologist then packed his tools and left. Spain later handed the body over to the British. This leads us to the next question. Where was the briefcase that came with the body? It had already been taken and sent to the office of the German forces commander in Spain before the autopsy. The British embassy representative deliberately delayed his arrival to collect the body to ensure that German intelligence had obtained the briefcase, which was the mission's primary goal. He feigned anger, shouting, "Where's the briefcase? It's extremely important, and I must have it. I hold you all responsible." This outburst was intended to reinforce the briefcase's importance to the Germans. After solving all these issues, the most critical problem remained. How would the British know if the Germans had opened the briefcase and read its contents? Since Spain was a neutral country between the two sides, it was obligated to return the briefcase to the British after giving it to the Germans. The Germans, in turn, were careful to make sure that the briefcase looked unopened, avoiding any suspicion and preventing any diplomatic fallout between Britain and Spain. To ensure the Germans had read the contents, British intelligence devised a clever trick. They placed an eyelash inside the secret letter. If the letter was opened, the eyelash would fall out, confirming that the Germans had read the information. If the eyelash remained inside, it would mean the briefcase was never opened, and the British would have to change their attack plans. The surprise came when the British Army retrieved the briefcase, opened the letter, and found the eyelash was missing, proving that the Germans had read the false information which led them into thinking that Britain would attack Greece. The Germans had taken the bait. On July 10, 1943, after British intelligence detected the transfer of German troops from Sicily to Greece to repel the expected British attack, Hitler was stunned to discover that the British and Americans were actually attacking Sicily. The small number of German forces remaining there couldn't withstand the assault, and the Allies soon took control of Sicily. The next step, my friend, was Italy, where Mussolini was deposed and captured while attempting to flee to Switzerland in the back of a truck with his lover, Clara Petacci. They were hiding in the truck's cargo area, hoping not to be recognized, with the driver agreeing to help them. Imagine, my friends, the once feared Italian Prime Minister Mussolini fleeing in the back of a truck. The driver later pulled a gun on them, capturing them in the name of the Italian people, and handed them over to the rebels, who executed Mussolini in the ancient Roman style, hanging him upside down at a gas station and beating him to death along with his lover. Amazingly, just 2 days later, Hitler shot himself along with his lover Eva Braun. Thus ended the terrifying reigns of Hitler and Mussolini. The Operation Mincemeat remains one of the most significant intelligence operations in history, a testament to the fact that raw power alone is not enough without strategy and intelligence. No matter how mighty your military is, the intelligence apparatus is the most crucial factor in armed conflicts and cold wars. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel to stay updated with new content. Thank you.